has become a believer in God and immortality, and he goes to church. I was shocked. A corpse would seem more credible than he is. I mean, there is something obscene in a living person sitting by the fire and believing in God. You know, oftentimes, I think sometimes we're startled by something like that, but that's just, over a century ago. But there's people, the Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, the ones were just so taken back, like, oh, we're in this modern age where atheism certainly on the rise and such terror. There's always been a cost. The Lord was right from the beginning to the end. He'll be 100% correct. Some of you have heard of this Joe Kennedy. He's the football coach up in Bremerton, Washington. He's an assistant coach that's been going to the 50-yard line and praying by himself after each game for years. The school districts come to him and said, you're not able to do that. And he has insisted on, no, it's not teaching structured time. There's not even a lot of students is around. I just go and I just give praise to my God on my own time after a football game. So no, you can't do that. And so he's in a court case right now fighting that battle. We have a highly decorated chaplain in the U.S. military. They're trying to dishonorably get rid of him and discharge him from the military, even though he's so decorated. The reason being is because as a chaplain, he had a young man come to him who was in a sexual identity crisis and wanted counsel, and the chaplain gave him a biblical answer, a biblical worldview answer to help this man find out who he was, to find out who he is, to see that he was loved and created by God, but he was created with a sexual identity. A guy named Josh, I heard this Andy Stanley story that Josh had just got done with college, had been interning for 2 years with a big TV broadcasting company. And after 2 years of interning through college, the company offered him the job. He said, the job's yours. Like, we have to post it, but the job's yours as soon as you finish college. And he finished college and said, the job's yours. And it was a high-paying job. And Josh told Andy he turned it down. And Andy's like, Josh, what are you doing? This is a job in your field. This is your dream job. This is right out of college. You're going to be making bucks. And Josh responded to Andy. He said, Andy, I couldn't do it. He said, the job would entail looking at TV monitors, TV bank after bank after bank of all the content that's going out from this broadcasting company. And one bank of screens is all the adult content that's going out from this TV communication program. And I just knew that it wouldn't be good for my soul to just day in and day out be just looking at this stuff as part of my job. So Andy said, well, did you tell them about it? Did you tell them that, is there another way or something else you do? And he said, well, I did. And they told me I was the only person that's ever been bothered by this job and the content. So Andy says 5 months later, this young man, Josh, still doesn't have a job. And he said, man, he was just trying to find a way around this. He said, jobs are so hard to come by, and jobs that pay like this are really hard to come by for this young man who had godly principles. And so 5 months later, he still doesn't have a job. And Andy's talking to him and said, I'd like to share your story. And he said, Andy, you can share it on one condition. He said, if you share it, let him know that all my needs have been met every time, on time. And I'm still holding on to my favorite verse, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Not to lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will lead your path straight. And that's what I've been leaning into, and God has provided for me. So if you share this story at all, let them know that God has come through every time, on time. So there will be a cost. It'll cost you something. That's good. It's going to be good to keep denying and saying yes to God, no to you. And not yes to you and no to God. Verse 35 goes on, Jesus says, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it. For what good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? So Jesus, like all good speakers, he's trying to start with something everybody can agree on. And so he kind of says there, hey, want to save your life? And everyone's like, yeah, I want to save my life. I want to save your life. And he kind of twists it and says, well, you're going to lose it. Because Jesus is saying something pretty simple, but everybody can agree with it. No matter how many bran muffins you eat, no matter how much exercise you get, no matter trying to find and grasping onto vitamins and minerals and things to grasp onto that fountain of youth, all of you out there are going to kick the bucket one time or another. And you're not going to be able to save your life, and it's going to be lost at one time or another. But in contrast, he says, whoever loses their life for my sake, and it's the life you're going to lose anyway, but whoever loses your life for me and my gospel, you're actually going to save your life. He's talking about not experiencing a second death, the death in the life beyond that the Pharisees know about, that the Sadducees don't. Speaking of the abundant life, speaking of the eternal life that only Christ can offer. In contrast to the life you're going to all lose anyway, no matter what you do or say, no matter what you eat, in contrast to that, if you live your life for me and the gospel, I can guarantee that you'll actually save your life, that you'll actually experience life. And he goes on, for what good is it to gain the whole world? What good is it to gain the whole world? And I realize everybody's got what that means to them. What does it mean for you to gain the whole world? Some people gaining the whole world is great riches, maybe a certain level of income, a certain level of fame. Some people out there, I know it's sex with hot people, season tickets at box seats with their favorite team, being independent, being powerful, being admired by everybody in the field that you're involved in, big muscles, fit body, whatever it is. You know, what good is it to gain the whole world? If that's your whole world, he's saying, what good is it to gain all that and forfeit your soul? Or he changes it around. He twists it backwards. Or what can anyone give? What can anyone give in exchange for their soul? And we see this happen. You know, you come into your life and you want your soul back. What would you give is what he's asking. But you've known people like that they think, you know, I'm in college now. I got my whole life before me, and it's not that they don't believe in God. It's not that they don't believe in Jesus. They're just not ready to deny themselves. And so they're thinking, you know, I'll wait to deny myself. I'll wait to really dive in big with Jesus in my 60s, you know, because what trouble could I get in my 60s? And so I'll wait till then to really start living for the Lord. And so he's saying in that case, if you just decided to sow your wild oats and gain everything you thought was the whole world, but it got to the end and you got a little bit more experience under your belt and you got a little bit more wisdom because you're just older, and you're thinking, man, I've gained everything. What wouldn't I give in exchange to get my soul back? And the answer for, I think, all of it is going to be everything. I'd give everything to get my soul back. Because I've seen how fleeting this life is. I've seen how fast it is, and now that I know I'd trade anything. And so the bottom line really is this last point is hopefully we will conclude that our soul is greater than anything else the world has to offer. And so the condition of that soul and who we know to be part of that soul has infinite value. So for many of us, we'll have some defining moments in our life that has now just become a story to tell. Some of you got a story to tell, and it's your story because it's a time where you said no to you and yes to God. And so it's a real positive story that you can share, and it builds your faith and it builds the faith of others. Philip Yancey says he interviewed faithful followers of Christ in places like Russia and China, Ukraine, Albania, Romania, and he'll ask him, why'd you take such a risk? Why'd you decide you wanted to follow Jesus when your government and your teachers and perhaps even your families insisted it was all a lie? And he said again and again he'd hear a two-pronged response. One response was that there was just such a spiritual thirst from these people, their inner longing that no amount of noisy propaganda could quiet or silence. He said the second prong was because they had a humble Christian who loved them, who might be living underground with them, that held the possibility of a power that could help them in their battle against alcoholism or drugs or meaninglessness, whatever demon happened to be tormenting them. There was one Christian that was living the life, that was speaking in their life. And I thought, this is true. What the government's telling me, what teachers are telling me is not the truth. One of the faithful people in this circumstance, the Soviet Union's most renowned sculptor who had designed Nikita Khrushchev's tombstone, eventually went into forced exile in Switzerland. Knowing the sculptor's talent, the authorities tried at first to hold on to him. We need Novinsky, one official said, but we cannot use him. We must create a communist Novinsky. His final rupture with the regime took place over a commission he did for the Communist Party building. Novinsky constructed a huge sculpture some 50 feet high and 50 feet wide that covered the entire facade. And he submitted the design in sections, and each of which was approved by party officials. Only at the unveiling did they see it as a whole and gasped in horror. A huge cross covered the front of the communist headquarters. A cross, said Novinsky? Can't you see it? It's a face. But knowing his Christian beliefs, authorities took it for a cross and expelled him from the country. The cross stayed in place, even though the state opposed it, did not. Some of this point, we think of great stories like that, like, wow, good for that guy. Wow, he was so bold. He held to his guns. He stuck to his convictions. He's not hypocritical. He was the guy that denied himself, but didn't deny God. And you're kind of thinking of your own stories, and you're thinking, what are my stories? And probably a lot of us at this point, depending on age and circumstance and character and different things, where we are with the Lord, we can actually think of a lot of times where we said no to God a lot more than we said yes to Him. And we can think of a time where we said yes to ourselves a whole lot more than we've said no to ourselves. And I got to say, there's hope for you. There's hope for those. Isn't it great? There's hope for you. It's one of the interesting stories, I think, in Scriptures, of all the time in Scriptures, is the fact that Peter has got to be so excited, right, that the events took place that Jesus said as they would, he would rise again after 3 days. And so Peter, he hears Jesus is alive. The gals run back from the tomb. He's alive, he's alive, he's alive, he's alive. And Peter's got to be like, yes, he's alive. And then he's got to be, how am I going to face him? Because my last glance from the Lord was right after I told a middle school girl that I never knew the guy. I never knew him. And he added, it says a curse. He added some good words with it. I never knew him, blankety blank. I never knew him once. And this is the Jesus that he's going to see after the resurrection, to see Peter in person. And what do you think Peter did? What do you think Jesus did with Peter? Came and browbeat him, right? And said, you loser! I knew I should have got some different disciples. Look at you guys. Y'all fled. You're denying yourself to middle school kids. You don't even have the guts to be strong in the midst of kids. Now, Jesus said, Peter, I'm going to put you in charge of the whole enterprise. I'm going to have you, we're going to move forward. We're going to start this church. Even though in verse 38, as we finish that little part of the section of Scriptures, if anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. I guess I just believe strongly in the perseverance of those in which God has called himself, and it's no more truer than with Peter. He failed just like we've failed. Just like we've fallen, and we serve a God that just loves so much and continues to love and is so graceful. Peter's restoration is found in John 21, 17 through 19. The third time he said to Simon, the vulnerability is on Jesus here. The third time he said to Simon, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you that when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." Well, indeed, Peter got his chance. Legend is that, history is that Peter was crucified upside down because he wasn't worthy to die in the same way of his Lord. But he got his chance to not deny himself and not as Lord. And I think each of us, as the Lord is writing our story, as we're living out this life, I think we're going to get a chance to grow in Him and mature in Him. And as we do that, to deny ourselves more and to live for Him more. It was interesting after these UCC shootings just here in our own state, Ben Carson and Franklin Graham were asked how they would respond to a shooter, and they kind of both, I guess we really don't know until you're there. And that was kind of, I was thinking, I hope I do something good. I hope I do something that's right. I think Franklin Graham, he'd first try and gain the upper hand, and I think that'd probably be maybe our natural inclination, is if we could gain the upper hand. But most of our lives, we have an opportunity just to live for Jesus, and I think some would say living for Jesus may be harder than dying for Him. Daily decisions, a daily walk, daily ministry, daily service, daily living with our spouses, daily living with our children, daily living out Christ to others is in a way denying ourselves and living for Him. So our time of invitation comes with challenges to those here today that may not have a relationship with Jesus yet. I want to exhort you, I want to encourage you to come to Jesus. I want to just say, please, receive Him into your life. It's way better than anything else. There's nothing comparatively that you could spend your soul pursuing or investing in than Jesus. He gives you abundant life. He gives you a purposeful life. And He gives you eternal life. And so there's really nothing to trade for that. So come to Jesus. I'm going to be in the back, just in the connection rooms down the hall, and I'd just love to just pray with you and say, come to Jesus. Be baptized into His grace and His love, and have His Spirit reside in you. And there's a whole group of Christians here this morning, and I want to challenge you. Maybe up to this point you're saying, man, I haven't really walked a very consistent walk with the Lord. I've done things that completely deny even knowing Jesus. And there's people that could look at my life and say, well, is he a Christian? Is he not a Christian? I don't know. I'd like to get to know him more because it's just not that obvious. And I'd say, if that's you, maybe you just want to come back and maybe just say, Alan, just pray for me that I'd walk with the Lord daily. I'd live for Him in what Jesus says is an unrighteous and lost generation. In this lost, dying generation, would you be one light for Christ? Would you decide to say, I will live for Him. I will walk for Him. Even if there's a whole community of people around that I live, that I work, that I go to school with, that don't know this Jesus, I want to be the catalyst for that possibly being able for them to know the Lord. And maybe that's you. And just want to say, Alan, just help me to be bold. Pray for me to be bolder where I'm at. And that's you. At this time, I'm just going to stand with us, and during this invitation, just give our whole selves to the Lord because He gave His whole self to us.